An artist calls the gallery owner and asks if there had been any interest in his paintings. "I have good news and bad news," the owner replies. The good news is that a gentleman inquired about your work and wondered if it would appreciate in value after your death. When I told him it would, he bought all 15 of your paintings. "That's wonderful," the artist exclaims. "So then what's the bad news?" "The guy was your doctor. Throughout my childhood, while my friends were playing sports and enjoying other activities, I could usually be found with a pencil sketching a portrait. Most of my portraits were the Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson. In 1990, when I was 14, I traveled to New York to be with the Rebbe for the holiday of Sukkot. My mother had asked me to give one of my drawings to the Rebbe, so I made a pencil sketch of the Rebbe and bought a frame for it. On the Sunday after the holiday, holding my drawing in a paper bag, I stood in a long line together with thousands of others who had come to receive the Rebbe's dollar and blessing. As I entered the front door of 770 Eastern Parkway and saw the Rebbe, I got nervous. I quietly turned to my brother and told him that I was not going to give it to the Rebbe. However, after I received the dollar and the Rebbe wished me bracha v'hatzlacha, blessing and success, I felt my hand with the paper bag suddenly lift up. And I quickly said, "Das ist for the Rebbe, soll gesund sein." This is for the Rebbe, may he be well. The Rebbe took the paper bag, nodded his head, and said a grace and dunk, a big thank you. And I was moved along the line. Last year, I purchased a 30-second video clip of this encounter. And after watching it numerous times, I noticed that as the Rebbe was turning his head to put the paper bag away, he was saying something. It took some time before I was able to hear what the Rebbe was saying, but then I heard it. He had wished me besurot tovot, that I share good news. Upon hearing this blessing for the very first time, my emotions ran high. I had a strong feeling that I was about to hear good news. But it wasn't until 6 months later that I realized how significant this blessing was. You see, as many of you know, after I contracted COVID in March, I spent 4 days on oxygen at Hackensack Hospital, followed by several complications and an excruciatingly painful infection. When I was ready to be discharged from the hospital, I was told that it would be at least several weeks before I would be able to resume working. For those that know me well, the only time I'm on the couch is usually after midnight, trying to finish my daily studies. So after a few days at home, on the couch, I was thinking, how on earth am I going to just sit here doing nothing? Some of you already know that it was then that I started to explore digital art using an iPad and an Apple Pencil. But it wasn't easy. Devorah's grandfather was an outstanding artist. A story he once told me gave me the inspiration to continue. In a private audience, the Rebbe once asked him whether he painted standing or sitting. Devorah's grandfather answered that he stood, since it was easier that way to stand back and see what he was painting. The Rebbe smiled and said Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel while he was lying on his back. It seemed unusual that the Rebbe had mentioned this to him, but a while later he ended up bedridden for several months with severe back pain. It wasn't until years later, however, that he realized that the Rebbe was encouraging him to continue his work even under such circumstances. And so, during my more than 2-month recovery, this new gift from Hashem not only distracted me from the severe pain and discomfort, it also helped me fulfill a lifelong dream to do colored portraits. I truly feel that this is a result of the Rebbe's blessing for good news when he was holding my sketch in 1990. But here's another element of good news that happened while I was on the couch that I haven't yet shared publicly. Several years ago, during an interview with an architect to discuss plans to build a home for our family and a place where we can share the joys of Judaism with our beloved community, the idea of building a mikveh came up and was encouraged by one of our dear congregants. So while I agreed and started discussions with a mikveh expert, we weren't quite sure how and when this would be possible. As I was laying on the couch and I noticed the foundation was reaching completion, I said, wait, we need to put the project on hold. We need to build a mikveh. We quickly contacted an engineer and an architect, and we applied for a permit to excavate another 9 feet below basement level and build our mikveh. Remarkably, 2 weeks later, on the 12th of Tammuz, we received the permits. For those wondering, the 12th of Tammuz celebrates the liberation of the Rebbe's father-in-law from a death sentence and imprisonment in 1927, where he was tortured for his counter-revolutionary activities of running underground yeshivot, synagogues, and mikvahs throughout Soviet Russia. And it is with immense joy and deep emotion that I share the good news with all of you today, that Baruch Hashem, just a few days ago, the concrete for the mikvah was poured. I believe the story of my recovery and the building of the mikvah isn't just my story. It's our story. You see, people are often shocked when I tell them that building a mikveh is more vital to Jewish continuity than a synagogue. In fact, if a community only has enough funds to build either a synagogue or a mikveh, the mikveh comes first. Not only that, but if there's no mikveh in a community, we are required to sell a synagogue and even a Torah scroll to raise funds to build a mikveh. It is fascinating that every archaeological dig of ancient cities in Israel has uncovered a mikveh. They even found mikvahs on Masada, where the Jews defended themselves against the Romans for 2 years under dire circumstances. Immersion in a mikveh facilitates the transition to a new spiritual status and sensitizes our bodies to a higher level of holiness. As we read in today's Torah reading, and we'll read in Musaf, the high priest would immerse in the mikvah on Yom Kippur before entering the Holy of Holies. And Jews were required to immerse in the mikvah before entering the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Today, while many men use a mikvah in preparation for prayer, the Shabbat and the holidays, the biblical mitzvah of mikvah is reserved for a married woman as well as for a bride before her wedding day. So today I would like to take a few minutes to reflect on the mikvah and how it represents the process of healing and regaining our wholesomeness in a chaotic and painful world. A mikvah is a gathering of spring or rainwater, enough to cover the entire body of an average-sized person. The rabbis calculated this to be 40 sa'ah, about 150 gallons. Man-made pools or natural water that were collected in a vessel and then used to fill a mikvah are disqualified. As you might imagine, it's a little more complex than just a simple pool of water. A mikveh is built with 2 baths of water, usually one on top of the other. The upper is the immersion bath with fresh tap water. The lower one, connected via a very small hole to the upper one, is filled with natural rainwater. To have a clean and hot kosher mikveh, each time we refill the upper bath with tap water, we must ensure that it is connected to the underground rainwater. Throughout our history, when a local mikveh was not available, Jewish women would often make difficult and challenging trips to immerse in a mikveh or a natural body of water. In the 80s, a Chabad businessman from Melbourne, Australia, had written to the Rebbe asking about the possibility of building a mikveh in Tasmania. He explained the geographics of Tasmania and asked whether it would be worth building. The Rebbe responded that it would certainly be needed and sent a $20 Australian bill as his partnership. In 1988, a mikveh was completed. However, over the years it developed some problems that made it unusable, and for quite some time, Jewish women in Tasmania would fly to a mikveh in Melbourne, which was stressful and costly. In March of 2020, when they began travel bans in Australia, Rabbi and Rebbetzin Gordon of Chabad of Tasmania had 2 things on their mind. How were they going to prepare for Pesach, and what would they do about a mikveh? There was actually a couple about to get married in Tasmania, and when the borders closed and no mikveh, they were very concerned. After discussions with an expert rabbi, it turned out that the only option they had was to fill the lower mikveh with ice manufactured specifically for this purpose. This is not a simple procedure. And to make matters worse, when they called the one ice company in Tasmania, they were told that they had closed production due to COVID. So they wrote a letter to the Rebbe and prayed. One Friday, out of the blue, the ice company called and said they were willing to open for them on the following Monday if they were paid in full by the end of the business hours on that Friday. A family member in Melbourne quickly posted a message on local community chats, and in less than an hour, the ice was paid for. It took 7 hours to put 300 blocks of ice into the top mikvah, and over a week to melt on its own and fill the bottom pool. Miraculously, their mission was accomplished. But what's going on here? Is this some sort of inside rabbinic joke? If we're not actually immersing in the natural waters, why can't we just use a regular hot tub? My friends, you see, the mikveh represents something very deep and profound. In the beginning, as fetuses in our mother's womb, we are all submerged in water. During that period of our lives, we were innocent and wholesome. We knew God and we bonded with Him in a very real way. The Talmud states that in the womb of our mothers, we come to know the entire Torah. Then came the day when we were thrust out from the enveloping waters, and with time and our sophistication and our ambitions, we often feel that our relationship with our inner divine dignity, our simplistic humanity, and our spiritual core is lost. It is the memory of the womb that comforts us, reassuring us that we are not truly alone, that underneath it all, we are still one with our Creator. This is the essence of the mikvah, to return to our source. But we still have a problem. The fact is that we don't live in a womb of godliness. We live in a fractured world. We live in environments in which we are dependent on other human beings and where we are subjected to hurt, pain, and disappointment. So how can we discover and maintain our divine inner purity under such conditions? This is where the upper and lower mikvah connection comes in. You see, as long as we connect our processed waters with the original mikvah waters, as long as we infuse our lives with God's mitzvot, such as caring for others, putting on tefillin, lighting Shabbat candles, eating kosher, studying Torah, affixing a mezuzah, observing family purity, educating our children and giving charity, then we will discover depth and beauty even in our ordinary, fragmented, and chaotic lives. Friends, it is at this time that we usually ask for your support with our Yizkor appeal. I believe there will be no greater nachas to your loved ones than to honor them with a pledge today towards the building of our mikveh and ensuring Jewish continuity and blessings for healthy children in our community. Our total mikveh costs are estimated to be around $80,000. We've already been able to set aside $30,000, thank God, which means we need another $50,000 to meet our goal of having the mikveh ready by next Rosh Hashanah. My goal is to raise 50% of it today. No pressure. Do your part and make your pledge, and I'm certain that God will give you the means to fulfill it. I thank you for your continued support, love, and friendship, and for joining us over the high holidays. We look forward to celebrating Sukkot and Simchas Torah with you, and God willing, soon, when we will emerge fully from the COVID pandemic. We will all be super proud of our accomplishments during these trying times.